Let's go ahead and begin. Again, welcome everyone, and especially anybody who's here for the Buddhist studies for the first time. Would you mind shutting the light off in the closet? So some of you know this already. This is ongoing time, these Monday night courses that happen usually every season, 4 times a year, often 8 weeks. And we're just unpacking together in community the teachings of the Buddha, the different maps the Buddha used to help us understand our mind and understand the experience of stress and freedom, and understand what's possible, what we can actually do with this life. So really happy to be able to do this together. And it's about a 6-year curriculum, and then we just repeat it. And some of you have been doing many rounds of these 6-year cycles through the different maps that the Buddha uses to teach. One phrase that's used in the tradition, wings of awakening. These are the wings of awakening. We have some other aspects of the Buddhist teachings that we weave into the 6-year curriculum, but the bulk of it is these 35 different teachings that the Buddha covered over his 45 years of teaching in northern India, 2,600 years ago. And one thing we do usually at the very beginning of the Buddhist studies class is we chant the 3 refuges slowly. Partly it's just nice to sing together. It builds community when you do something together. Now in the hybrid world, it's a little different, but those of you online, you should be able to hear the community here in the room singing. We can't hear you, otherwise there'd be a lot of feedback. But we know, some of you are joining in, and that's great. And the idea of the 3 refuges isn't to be a Buddhist or, pay homage even to that person who lived 2,600 years ago, although some of us probably do feel a lot of gratitude. And even though the person lived a long time ago, it still can be an important teacher of ours, right? And certainly for me, and I think for many of us, the teachings have been really impactful, really useful. So there is gratitude. But really, when we take refuge in the Buddha, as much as that, the statue or the idea of the person 2,600 years ago may be kind of a symbol for us, the Buddha really represents this capacity we all have to be awake, to be intimate, to be clear, to be sensitive with the way it is. And the way it is, that's Dhamma, that's the second refuge. So, it's kind of, I think, cool that a group of people come together and sing, I take refuge in being awake, being intimate with the way it is. That feels really inspiring to me. And it's just because we're connecting with people throughout the ages and throughout the world that have been interested in these teachings and put these teachings into practice. We do it in the Pali language because wherever people have done these practices, undertaken these practices, that's sort of what unifies. It's kind of a nod to the historic origin of the teachings. This person way back when in northern India conveying these teachings, what this person had come to understand from studying his own mind. So we take refuge in the Buddha, being awake. We take refuge in Dhamma, being awake to the way it is. And we take refuge in Sangha. And, we often understand the word Sangha as spiritual community, but it's really a life in any moment, anybody's life in any moment, where that way of engaging, that way of living is really coming out of that intimacy of being awake with the way it is, being intimate with the way it is. And then the choices we make, the way we engage in those moments, it's really beautiful and often creative and nimble and fierce in moments and receptive in other moments. As a famous Zen teacher, Chan teacher from China said, when asked, what what is the summary of all the Buddhist teachings? He was asked a question like that, and his response was an appropriate response. And that's really a great thing, because when we're really Buddha, being intimate with Dhamma, our response is going to be appropriate to the moment, because all there is this depth and breadth of intimacy with the way it is, internally, externally. And so, of course, that's going to set up an appropriate response. Not a perfect response, as if there is one, but just a response that comes out of that fearless sensitivity with the way it is, including our own baggage that we're bringing to the moment, our own biases, right? The whole shebang, internally, externally, the breadth, the depth of the way it is. And that, I like that. That's worthy of taking refuge in, that capacity in an ongoing way to be responding appropriately in the great chaos and complexity of our lives, right? Isn't that inspiring? So that's what we sing to, these possibilities of taking refuge and being awake, taking refuge and being intimate with the way it is, this dynamic of the present moment, and responding in these appropriate ways because of that intimacy with the way it is. Anyway, you can feel free to listen if you don't want to chant along. Otherwise, we'll do that now, and then I'll guide us in a meditation. We'll start learning, if you haven't already, some of the instructions that come from the Anapanasati Sutta, and I'll also introduce the course a little bit more after the guided set. So I just posted the refuges in the chat for those of you online, and we'll begin. Buddhang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. So let's settle into our meditation time. Doing our best to feel at home in the body. Establishing mindfulness to the fore, as the Buddha says in the Anapanasati Sutta. Or taking the time to remember, to recognize the present moment. What it means to remember, to recognize right now that this is being known. Any aspect of the present moment will do. We're not at this point focusing the attention. We're just remembering this capacity to be present. And being present is the same as saying this mind is not distracted, free from distraction. But it's important to sense present moment awareness when it's not dependent on a meditation object, what it means to be present with whatever's predominant in the moment, or whatever it is that the mind is knowing. Then awareness is knowing that the mind is knowing what it's knowing. That's what awareness or mindful awareness is. It's this reflective knowing of what the mind is conscious of. It's a watching or an observing of the mind itself. And we're not controlling the mind. It's not about controlling anything. It's simply knowing or being aware of what the mind is doing, what it's knowing. This is what it means when the Buddha says, establish mindfulness to the fore. We're simply remembering this natural capacity the mind has to be reflectively aware. Oh, it's like this. Sitting, hearing Mark's voice is like this. Feeling what we're feeling is like this. Sensing what we're sensing is like this. And then the Buddha invites us to simply be interested, to choose to be interested, to have the intention to be interested in the natural process of breathing in and breathing out. It's not about pushing anything else away. And so we get to develop this particular mental muscle of keeping something in mind. keeping an aspect of our experience, present moment experience, in mind. There is this breathing process. Can we keep it in mind? The physicality of breathing in and the physicality of breathing out. And there's a powerful letting go. All the other things that the mind could be paying attention to. Now it's choosing to be interested in this relatively ordinary process of breathing in and breathing out. To feel the in-breath from the very beginning and all the different sensations through to the very end of that in-breath. And then feeling that short pause in the beginning of the out-breath. And tracking the physicality of breathing out all the way to the very end of the out-breath. And we learn how to be really intimate with the natural process of breathing without falling into any habit of needing to control it or manage it. Still, the breath may feel like it's being controlled, but just check. You don't have the intention to control it, and maybe that's enough. Just let it feel, let it be the way it is, even if it does feel controlled, or too short, or too long, or whatever it might feel like. And at this point, we're emphasizing this capacity we have to be interested in something ordinary, and therefore to keep it in mind, all the while not getting tight or controlling. So it's a real important skill to learn. And of course, it's a very deep habit for most of our minds for it to just go wherever it wants to go, and to think this, and to worry about that, and to focus on that, and this. So we're going to feel all those impulses, but we're going to keep remembering to notice the meditation object, the ordinary natural process of breathing in and out. However, that's easy for you to feel in your body. So the ordinary sensations of breathing in and breathing out, as they actually are for you. And tracking the breathing process with enough continuity that we naturally notice the relative length of each in-breath, each out-breath. And you might even naturally correlate that as you have more continuity and as the mind and body begin to settle, the quality of the breath changes from a longer, rougher breath to a shorter, more refined rhythm of breathing. But don't try to make that happen. Just simply this willingness to be interested in the breathing process as it actually is. And as best we can, we're letting go of all the other phenomena and choosing to be interested in this simple process of breathing in and out. Of course, everything else will be here in the present moment, but let it be in the background. And because of our interest, the sensations of breathing in and out come into the foreground of attention. And even if the breathing process becomes really refined, quiet, just serves as a useful teacher, teaching us how to be with something that becomes subtle and refined. So the interest also has to become subtle and refined. And there's a very important lesson to be learned with this exclusive attention to the physicality of breathing in and breathing out, and letting everything else happen far into the background. So in a way, we're secluding the mind from the great diversity of our experiences by choosing to be interested in just this one thing, the breathing in and the breathing out, especially as the breath becomes more simple and refined. And you can sense the seclusion of your mind. And although it might be an acquired taste, there's a real pleasure, subtle, but a real pleasure in the seclusion. And in a very relaxed but persistent way, you could be interested in this unwavering, continuous presence with the current of breathing in and breathing out. And just do the best you can and be willing to begin again and again in a relaxed way. It's true, we're training the mind. And so depending on each of our particular minds, there may be At times, some resistance or rebellion. But we just do the best we can, and we learn how to train the mind, to encourage it. As if we're checking out for ourselves the Buddha's teaching that there really is this important current of pleasure that can be detected when we get some continuity with our exclusive meditation object of the breath, which is just the very start of these 16 instructions that we're going to be studying. But it's really important to sense right here at the beginning this current of pleasure, however subtle, however faint it might seem to you. Remember, the real effort here is the effort to be interested in the physicality of breathing in and out. And when right with that, there's a current of pleasure, joy, then to notice that as well, but to not forget just the current of breathing in and breathing out. The current of sensation, whether they're gross or subtle, whether the breath is long or short. And also to get interested in the short pause between the in-breath and the out-breath, and the out-breath and the in-breath. It's important that when there is that pleasure of seclusion that naturally arises when there's some continuity, we really let the pleasure have its effect on the mind and body. And we do that by simply noticing it right there with the experience of breathing in and breathing out, noticing the pleasure of seclusion. So take a little time, adjust your body, feel free to stand for a moment if you'd like, so you'll be comfortable. Good to be with everyone. So I'll talk about the content of our course this fall, but first let me just say a few general things about the Buddhist studies classes, because as opposed to some of the other programs here, like our weekly practice groups, which in some ways are the main event that Shelley and I do, Shelley teaching on Wednesday night and me teaching on Sunday. The Buddhist studies class, we want a commitment from people taking the class. So I always say a few words about what that commitment looks like. The program is really for people who are sitting regularly, if not every day, almost every day. People who are really interested in the practice have a sense of its value. Even if you're relatively new, you have a sense of its value, and you want to put in time. So often people who take the Buddhist studies classes have done retreats, whether they're just half day or day long, or a lot of you have done residential. Some of you have done many, many residential retreats. But the idea is, and everyone has different duties and responsibilities in your lives. But the idea is, with the time you have, you're interested in committing some of that time to using meditation to study the mind. Because the process of meditation, it's really, all it is creating ideal, simplifying our lives and creating ideal circumstances for the mind to study the mind, using the mind to study the mind. So often it means sitting in a quiet space, relatively still, relatively upright so we don't get sleepy, relatively relaxed so we don't scream in pain, in a place where there aren't going to be distractions, loud sounds, or cats licking our hand, or things like that, children asking for our attention. And we can do the study, right? We're taking the words that you're hearing me and the study you do at home from the articles and talks that I'll be sending out to everyone. You're getting some new information. You're thinking about that new information, so you get it, like you at least get it on that level where you can then, when you do have times to be reflective, not just formal meditation time, but other quiet moments of your day, you can bring that information online in light of your actual experience. And then if you do that enough, and that would be what we would call contemplating or reflecting. You're using the teachings, practices, and you're bringing them online in terms of your own present moment experience. And if they're of any value, those teachings, if we understand them correctly enough, apply them correctly enough, and they're actually useful teachings, then we're going to have insight. We're going to see something we haven't seen before. The spiritual learning that we call insight. That's what the word vipassana means. And, often it gets translated as insight. This is in the West, often Theravada Buddhism, kind of Buddhism in Sri Lanka and Burma and Thailand and Laos and Cambodia. We call it insight meditation often in the West, or vipassana meditation, because it's just honoring of that process of bumping into the teachings, getting interested, learning some of the teachings so we've internalized them, we can bring them up, and then figuring out how to use them to be intimate. Basically, the teachings are going to replace our habit of wrongly relating to our own experience. That's really what the teachings are for. They're for deluded people like ourselves who are relating to our experience in self-centered ways, self-centered, ignorant ways, because of how we've been conditioned. So we need to learn teachings that then can, like a peg getting inserted in a hole where there's a rotten peg, we're pushing out the wrong ideas and replacing it with ideas that actually will help us be intimate in ways that we weren't previously intimate. Help us be awake, be clear in ways that we haven't been previously awake and clear. So we see the nature of the mind, the nature of experience, because the mind isn't being corrupted or distorted by our conditioned habits of viewing things a particular way, like the way the culture has conditioned us to relate to our experience and to relate to the mind. So that's the ask in Buddhist studies, is that you do some study. So it may be, some of you who are really busy, you've got 12 kids or whatever it is, or a busy job, or 14 cats, but at least you're showing up on Monday night whenever you can. Now, I know there will be some people who have business travel or family obligations, but we do record programs. It's immediately being live streamed at our YouTube channel. So it's there now and it will be there forever, as long as there's YouTube channels for you to watch. So if you can't do it on Monday night, then watch it when you can, so that you can be part of the community and part of the shared commitment that we're doing this study together. And then the other resources I send out, that's really up to you. Some of you hopefully will do a lot. Some of you won't have time to do a lot. But just look through them, see, I might highlight a particular thing to dig into. I've already sent, most of you hopefully have received those emails, the link to Venerable Analio, this wonderful German monk, who's written an excellent book on mindfulness of breathing, the Buddha's discourse, the Anapanasati discourse. And it's a little nerdy, but I think it's pretty clear nonetheless. But there are other resources there too for you to look at. And I'll get another email out to the group tomorrow. And then every other week, because you're doing this listening and then this contemplation and then this application and hopefully some learning, seeing what you haven't seen before, using the teachings on mindfulness of breathing, like maybe even tonight in the guided meditation, you learned a little bit, saw something you hadn't seen before about how the mind can use an exclusive object of awareness, and the kind of relaxed but persistent application of the mind to the remembering breathing and as being known, all the way through that duration of the in-breath, without any wavering, without any forgetfulness, without any overreaching of the, trying to control that, trying to make the in-breath different, or holding back. Like, oh yeah, I know that in-breath is over there, but I don't really have to be intimate. So just finding like how to be all in without being controlling, without getting tight about being all in, how to be really there. One of my teachers, Sayadaw U Pandita, he would sometimes say, and it can be misunderstood, awareness is rubbing up against the phenomena that's being known. It's really there. It's not, the knowing isn't, it's knowing the in-breath, the sensations of breathing in the sensations of breathing in. That's where the knowing is, not from some observation platform, 200 meters away, watching the breath over there. Because there's really no distance except the distance the mind, the thinking mind, constructs. Like thinking, and this is gonna be the conditioned habit for almost all of us, that the in-breath, the out-breath isn't important. And that will create some distance because that lingering sense that it's not important. Well, in a way, it's not important, but what's important, radically important, is the intimacy, is the connecting. That's what's important. And the dropping of the mind's habit of thinking, awareness thinking or consciousness thinking, I'm responsible for the diversity of my experience. I've got to be alert. And if there's anything interesting in my thinking process and my hearing and my sensing of physical sensations or seeing sights, I've got to be there. So when we train our mind to be with an exclusive meditation object, we're really countering some serious conditioning to have that sort of, 360 awareness of what's going on around us. It's like, it's not like falling asleep. I was going to say, there's something about falling asleep in a public space, where somebody could come and do something funny because you're asleep, you wouldn't know, right? You're vulnerable, you're exposed. So we generally like to sleep when we have a little solitude, right? So it's the same thing, that's why when we find a place to sit, we often look for a place where we feel safe. So I can bring my attention. Remember, this isn't the whole practice. This is just a particular training. This is step 1 or 2, or step 1 and 2 of the 16 steps. So that exclusive attention to the breath is only at the beginning of the Buddha's instructions. From then, we move really to paying attention mostly to the mind. But it's really important to discover and to feel the pleasure of putting down the world, putting down this felt obligation to have to attend to everything. I mean, we don't really attend to everything anyway, we tend to get lost in thought all the time. But strangely, we have this idea, when we're asked to pay attention to one thing, then we've got to have this sort of global vigilance about this or that or whatever might be of interest. So it takes some courage and some real persistence. We really learn about persistence. We learn about patience. We learn about this delicacy of wise effort, which is interest, like a pure interest, not a controlling interest, but not a superficial interest. What is that right quality of interest that keeps the attention right with that natural process of breathing in and out? However you're feeling it, doesn't really matter. Some people like it, feeling that movement in the abdominal wall. Some people here, some people have other ways that it's relatively easy for them to feel that natural physical process of breathing in and breathing out, including finding a way to connect in that brief pause between the in and out breath. Because people can get lost in that moment, especially when things become more refined. It can be like this not seen habit of mind that's saying something like, nothing's happening now, this would be a good time to think about something or to do something else. So to specifically notice that pause, and you can even just have a general sense of the totality of the body in that moment, if you want. And then the beginning of the out-breath or the beginning of the in-breath. And then again, that pause in that transition. Some people even feel the breath throughout the body. So don't have the actual sensations that you're tracking are as important as the intimacy and the continuity, the refined interest, the purity of interest. Because when we get to step 3, which we'll see, we're opening up to the totality of the body. So the Buddha says something like, while breathing in, one trains himself to experience the whole body. While breathing out, one trains oneself to experience the whole body. So awareness of breathing in and out never really goes anywhere except into the background, because what's coming into the foreground of attention is awareness of the whole body. So there's it's good just for me to name, I think, these different skill sets that we're going to be learning just in the first group of 4 instructions. So the 16 instructions that we're going to be studying, they're called, each set of 4 is called a tetrad. I guess it's a mathematical term, I'm guessing. So the first instruction, in a way, the first instruction even comes at the very beginning, where the Buddha says, and you can see this in the handout. Let me put that in the chat for people who don't have that. Okay, people online, the link is now in the chat. And if you open that up, one side just has some notes about each of the 4 tetrads, what it's really about. And those are for me. And on the other side is just Gil Fronsdal's translation of the 16 steps, including the paragraph that comes right before that. And how practitioners is mindfulness of breathing in and out of great fruit and of great benefit when cultivated and made much of. Here practitioners, having gone to the wilderness, a foot of a tree, it's an empty building, one sits down with legs crossed and body erect, establishing mindfulness to the forefront. Always attentive, one breathes in with mindfulness and breathes out with mindfulness. So breathing out with mindfulness, breathing in with mindfulness just means, and that's what I try to convey in the guided meditation tonight, that there's that reflective knowing. So while the breath is coming in and the body, mind is naturally sensitive to the physicality, right? But there's that reflective knowing that that sensitivity is being known, being felt. So we're aware that the mind is sensitive to breathing in, the experience of breathing in. And we're aware that the mind is being sensitive to the breathing out. We're keeping that in mind. We're not forgetting it. That's what it means. And then the next real instruction is a little bit more complex to understand, at least. So here, Gil Fronsdal translated as, breathing in long, one knows I'm breathing in long. Breathing in short, one knows I'm breathing in short. Breathing out long, one knows I'm breathing out long. Breathing out short, one knows I'm breathing out short. So the idea, I think, as I understand it, and as I have found useful for me, and Venerable Analayo feels this way as well, and it seems like what the Buddha is saying, you know, this refinement of interest, we want to be aware, tracking the ordinary natural process of breathing in and out well enough, clear enough, to be able to discern if that's a, you know, a grosser, longer breath or a more refined, shorter breath. And you'll notice when your mind, body, heart system settles down, the breathing process becomes more refined, more quiet, and shorter. So my sense is that the Buddha's giving us some instruction about the quality of interest, like interested enough, close enough, that we can really discern, how is this breath? Is it rough? Is it smooth? Is it short? Is it long? Is it gross? Is it refined? And we'll just start naturally discerning or connecting the dots, like, oh, how to be with the breath in a way that allows everything to become more refined. The interest becomes more refined. The quality of the body becomes more refined. The quality of breathing becomes more refined. Awareness becomes more refined. That's just called settling down, right? The deepening or the beginning of samadhi, that a mind that's normally distracted and dissipated and scattered now is beginning to gather and unify. That's what the word samadhi means. It usually gets translated, as most of you know, as concentration in the text, but maybe a better word is something like the stability of mind or the unification of the mind, or instead of concentration. And we start to feel that even with the first set of instructions, where we're just tracking the breath as an exclusive object of awareness. We're just keeping this in mind, and nothing else really matters. So it gets to fall into the background. Even our doubt, am I doing this right? And you know, this, a lot of people think that this might be like a beginner's practice, but you can't really do this when you're dealing with a lot of hindrances, right? Doubt, sleepiness, restlessness, wanting the pain to go away in the knee. So when, in a way, we have to shift out of the 16 instructions that we find in the Anapanasati Sutta And we have to draw on other teachings and practices when our mind is overwhelmed with hindrances, caught up in wanting, caught up in aversion, caught up in dullness or sleepiness, caught up in restlessness, and caught up in that unskillful kind of doubt where we're just sort of spinning in a way that takes us away from the moment. That's the kind of doubt that's a hindrance. And we can talk about that more, but I want to just finish describing this first set of 4 instructions so you can begin to work with it at home. So again, just like an ongoing instruction that you can give yourself, take some time at the beginning of your sit. Don't go right to the breath. Just take some time to remember what it feels like, what it is like to be present. And to really clarify for yourself, as if for your first time, so it gets deeper and deeper, your understanding, the difference between distractedness and your direct, immediate experience of non-distractedness. Oh, this is what distractedness feels like, or this is what non-distractedness is like, but not dependent on the breath as your exclusive meditation object. So you get a sense of what it is to be non-distracted even before you turn your attention to the breath, establishing mindfulness to the fore. And then when you have that clear sense, okay, this is what non-distraction is. This is what it is to keep remembering the present moment, or remembering to recognize that this is being known, that the present moment is being known. Whatever it is that's being known in the present moment, doesn't matter. And then let the interest in that natural process of breathing in and out have its effect. So now the breath, whatever was happening in that moment with the breath, comes into the forefront. And then there's enough interest and persistence to begin to discern the quality of each inhalation and each exhalation, whether it's a longer one or a shorter one, a grosser one or a more refined out breath or in breath. And don't feel obliged to go on. Later, and some of you have been through these instructions many times, worked with mindfulness breathing for many years. There can be a bit of a problem when people really want to stay with the earlier instructions, but their mind is really in a more refined place. So obviously, if that's the case and you're an experienced meditator, you don't have to take a lot of time in these earlier steps. And just remember, you might go right to step 13, and that's just where your mind is practicing. But then a hellish storm breaks out, and you're in a very contracted state, and you're not even doing the 16 instructions. You're just doing your best to unhook from the hindrances, because you're really attached to some drama that arose in your mind. And then your body hurts, and now you're really attached to the pain in the body. And then you really want this to be over. And then you have a doubt storm, and then another storm, right? And then you just nimbly use whatever skillful means help you move in the direction of the continuity of present moment awareness. But for the purposes of the training we're doing this fall, it's good to spend some time in all the steps and not to push yourself to move forward, to really connect with the pleasure, the rightness of each of the steps. Like the Buddha says, there's a taste of freedom all the way through the practice. Just as the ocean has a single taste, that of salt, in the same way these teachings and practices have a single taste, that of freedom, or you could say release, as some people translate it. And Bhikkhu Bodhi, in an article wrote, he's a Western Buddhist monk, at every level, the flavor of the teaching is of a single nature, the flavor of freedom. It is only the degree to which this flavor is enjoyed that differs. And the difference is in the degree, the difference in degree is precisely proportional to the extent of one's practice. Practice a little Dhamma, and one reaps a little freedom. Practice abundant Dhamma, and one reaps abundant freedom. The Dhamma, right, the practices, teachings, bring their own reward of freedom, always with the exactness of scientific law. And there's real truth to that. Like when that persistence and that interest is really pure, and the awareness of the breathing process in and out is unwavering, and the mind is truly secluded from everything else, like it's really because of the interest in the natural process of breathing in and out, and that just the refinement of that interest and the refinement of the breath, and the refinement of the breath causing the refinement of the interest and awareness become more and more refined, more and more pure. That mind gets really secluded, and it's as if everything else in sensuality, in the realm of our sense experience, becomes really distant. And it's like a profound vacation from being pushed around by not just sense experience, but our interpretation and reaction to other sense experiences. Even when we have relatively good concentration and a loud car, drives down the street here or at your house, right? Even just the awareness going there and knowing that there's a car is a disturbance. Now, with the deepening of wisdom, that doesn't have to be a problem. But when we're still developing wisdom and using samadhi, this settledness of the mind, to deepen wisdom, it's affecting in a way. That's why, the community raised a lot of money and worked really hard to build this nice place. And we did all kinds of things. You wouldn't believe the kinds of things we did to make this room quiet. Like we have special drywall and special insulation between the drywall. And I ran into somebody who was a community member for many years, and he and the contractor we used, a longtime community member, David Asselstein, but this other community member spent hours in the subfloor and then in screwing this floor down to the subfloor, like many, many more screws than a normal contractor would use, so there would never be squeaks in the floor. There's just, you'll notice those people who do walking meditation during retreats in this room, for a wooden floor, there's very few squeaks, because it's nice that it's relatively quiet. I mean, we're still in the middle of a city, but given that we're in the middle of the city on relatively busy streets, it's a quiet place. And it helps when we're in training. When our wisdom is complete, we won't be dependent on having a quiet retreat center or meditation center. But until those days, or that day, it's really nice to be able to have the safety that allows us to do the practice. So we can really taste that seclusion, really know what it's like, and to see how an exclusive meditation object in moments can be a really important skillful means, like a kind of medicine that you might want to use from time to time. And I'll give another example that many of you have heard me say before, but it's just a powerful example. Some of you know a little bit about Thich Nhat Hanh, who died about a year and a half ago, but he was a very famous teacher here in the West, but he was from Vietnam and a peace activist as a monk during the Vietnam War, which is why they didn't let him back into the country when he went to Paris for the Paris peace talks in the late 60s. But it was our good fortune here in the West, because he taught in the West and for many decades. He eventually was allowed back near the end of his life and ended up dying in Vietnam in his 90s, not too long ago. But when I went to a retreat in Plum Village, his monastery in France, a number of years ago, for experienced retreatants, and he was then in negotiation with his first visit back to Vietnam. So this was probably 20 years ago. And so he hadn't been allowed back for a long time. But he was negotiating with the leaders in Vietnam whether he could go back. And they had made all kinds of promises, and then they were taking them away because his trip back was getting a lot of press in Vietnam. And they were afraid of his too much, attracting too much attention. So they basically said, instead of bringing, many, many thousands of books to give away, printed in Vietnamese, he could only bring a few books. And it really bothered him. So he was really upset in this negotiation, but he really wanted to go back. He didn't want to lose the chance. So right there in the middle of this really intense negotiation, he just brought his attention to his breath, exclusive attention to his breath, completely, because his mind obviously is well trained. He's a really powerful teacher and practitioner. His mind was not paying attention to the other 4 or so people in the room, and or the situation at hand. It was only knowing, touching, if he was feeling the breath here. And maybe the bliss of being oblivious to everything else, just this being known, this is the mind that isn't burdened by anything else. This is the mind that put down everything else. Just like, in a really gross sense, just like when we watch a fun movie, our problems disappear for an hour or so, right? We're not worried about our financial situation or this or that. We're absorbed in the movie. So seclusion is just that ability to drop the world. Now we're going to start opening up to the world in bits and pieces, but not the superficial world, right? But first we got to learn how to put it all down. And the way we know we've put it all down is it's guaranteed to feel good. It feels good to put it all down. So that I'm just saying this to encourage us all to persist and to just know that we have to make mistakes by trying too hard to be with the exclusive object, the physicality, breathing in and out, and not trying hard enough, right? So to try too hard, so the mind is a bit controlling, tight, getting a headache, as if like we're staring at something. That's a common thing. People actually get physical tension around their eyes, as if you're like looking. In order to feel whatever you're feeling, that natural process of breathing in and out, you have to look at it. If you're not looking at it, you can't feel it. But yet that's just not true. You don't have to change your posture. You don't have to imagine you're looking at it, because the feeling of the breathing process is felt. Where is the feeling felt? We want to say here or here, but that's not actually true. When we're feeling, you can just, like even touching my knee now, my hand touching my knee, or you touching whatever you're touching, that experience of touch, where is that happening? Subjectively in your experience, where is it happening? Yeah. It's in the mind. It's right here. It's being known here in the mind, in the heart. And the idea that it's being felt over here, that's an idea. The location of the knee, my right knee, that's an idea in the mind. That's a bit of separation. That's getting in the way of intimacy. We're always feeling the breath in the mind, right in the middle. The only place anything is ever known or felt. Everything is felt and known in one place, which is here and now, which in Buddhism we call the mind or the heart, chitta. That's where everything is known. Now, that programming that the breath is known in my chest and it's down here, or I'm feeling it up here. Don't worry about that programming because it's got a lot of momentum. Just don't pay attention to that program. Just let it be in the background. That's why we talk about the, like a lot of people too, there's, and this can be a little controversial because there's a sense of, oh, we just want to be with the elemental sensations, like the touching, whether that touching has the flavor of hardness or softness or smoothness or roughness. And sometimes people will tell you, like teachers even will say that, no thoughts, or being with sensation that in a way that's not mediated with any cognitive activity or thought. But don't get too tight about that. It's just about you really, the one thing that we can trust is that intimacy, the sort of continuity of present moment awareness. It feels good. It has a very distinct feeling, and it's pleasant. And that's really what's trustworthy. So if it doesn't feel good, you're probably to some degree disconnected, still identified with your thoughts, but not aware that you're identified with your thoughts about the breath, trying too hard, not thinking it's worth persisting, thinking it's stupid. And that all of those sort of habits can be very subtle. Like we won't necessarily notice it. So a lot of what we're doing is, it's like, I remember one teacher saying that, especially this aspect of the training, we can't really understand the value until we do it. It's like no one can tell us in a way that actually matters how important it is. You have to do it, and then you realize, oh, that was really important to learn that. That I can put down, the mind can put down everything. And we don't know what it's like until we do it. And we're not putting down everything because we're really choosing to be interested in something, but we're letting go of so much and being aware of that. And you'll see that, with the third step where we open to the whole body, we're realizing that that collectedness, that unification, that non-distractedness doesn't have to be dependent on an exclusive meditation object. It can have this inclusive vibe where the mind doesn't have to be disturbed or distracted by like the totality of what's happening in the body. Pleasant sensations, unpleasant sensations, neutral, subtle, energetic sensation, grosser sensations. It all can be the way it is. So just some things to play with there is to just, without getting tight about it, notice the difference between the elemental sensations of breathing in and out, like the actual feeling of movement of when your abdominal wall or your rib cage moves. But you have to, like with all of these terms, like the touch of the air touching the nostrils or the movement, we have to realize that the concept touch or the concept movement is distorting. So we have to use the concept of touch, of movement, as a skillful means, like aiming the mind to the actual experience of movement, not the idea of movement, or the actual experience of touching is not my idea of air touching the nostrils, right? Because you'll see, and the important thing is that you can't stop it, but you want to distinguish like the mental image. Our minds, we actually create a little mental image. Sometimes it's abstract, sometimes it's literal. It just depends on, I think, the temperament of our minds, of your mind or of your breath coming in. You have like a little documentary going on of breathing in and breathing out. And awareness unknowingly will be aware of the mental images of breathing in and out and the idea of breathing in and out, but distant from the physicality of breathing in and out. But don't worry about that remaining there. Just bring the physicality, let the interest really hone in on that. And, as things settle down, even that is so ephemeral. There's a basic teaching, that as our practice develops some momentum, the nature of the knowing mind and the nature of the experience that's being known by the knowing mind start to share characteristics. Or we could say, like in this case, knowing the breath starts to have characteristics of knowing, like being really ephemeral and not much of anything. And some of you have had this experience, like with the breath, and there's a good continuity with the breath, and it's like, where did it go? It's like so refined, so subtle. But we know there's knowing, we know there's interest, and we can learn to hang out even in that place. And remember, what really stabilizes the awareness in the more refined places, when we're still using the breath in this more exclusive way, is sensing the refined, pleasure of that seclusion. The mind is secluded, and that feels good. So let me just, before we run out of time, finish up the 4, because it's totally fine to, when you feel like you have, or you're coming to the end of your time, then you might want to just work with all 4 of the first 4 steps. So 1 trains oneself while breathing in, experiencing the whole body. 1 trains oneself while breathing out, experiencing the whole body. So then it's not like you got to look around, literally with your eyes, or even internally, like, okay, how's the right hand feeling? How's the left hand feeling? How about the right leg? How about the pelvis? Because however the body is presenting itself, it's more like a confidence movement, like the mind or the heart, it's already sensitive to the body. So it's more like we're attending to the sensitivity, the natural, unavoidable sensitivity, so that the body is, cannot not be felt, like right now. Instead of thinking the instruction is, I have to pay attention to the body, it's more like realizing the body's being felt. You see the distinction? And there's a profound acceptance, like not second guessing how it feels. Oh, this is how the body feels. Because we're not looking for the right way for the body to feel. And this can be problematic, because maybe you had a previous sit, for example, where you felt like, I'm really connected to the body, really intimate in that inclusive way with the body. And so it should feel that way now. But it isn't about feeling the body in the right way. It's about realizing how the body's being felt already. So it's just like switching channels. We were with that exclusive object, and now we're switching channels to the inclusive object of body. And we're realizing with practice, right? This is such an important training just for therapeutic reasons, like just healing. We're healing the way the mind relates to the body. And needless to say, I think there's a lot of baggage in how our minds, our hearts sense the body. There's just so many injuries and insults and disturbances that we have in terms of the way the mind understands and relates to the body. And so we close it off, and we're a fierce and hateful, oppressive tyrant to our body. We have all these different unwholesome patterns. So now we're cultivating, because we've tasted the pleasure of seclusion, as we transition to this inclusive awareness of the body, we're transitioning in a way that doesn't diminish the pleasure. So now the unification we had with this relatively neutral experience of breathing in and out, now we're trying to have that same wholeness, that same non-distraction, that same purity with the totality of the body. And it takes practice to accept the body. And a trick, or I don't know about a trick, a skillful means that will be helpful for many of you is there will be, for many of us, a habit of wanting to look in the body where there's pain or where there's discomfort, right? And to not look where we tend to feel numbness, and to really hold tight to pleasant, if there is any pleasantness in the body. But the key is, the object is actually the totality of the body, right? So it's like everything belongs, and no favorites, and nobody left out, just as it is, as it's presenting itself to the sensitive heart in this moment, just as it is. Because any of that picking and choosing gets in the way of what we're learning in this third step, which is, again, training ourselves while breathing in. So we still use the rhythm of breathing in and out as a kind of reminder that we're here and now in the present moment. How do I know? Because the breath coming in happens in the present moment, and the breath going out happens in the present moment. And we're training the mind to receive the experience of the body, the sitting body, as it is, in a beautiful, loving, non-judging, non-manipulative, non-contrived way, just as it is. No preconceived ideas of how the body should be. And we know we're doing that right when we begin, and this is the fourth step, one trains oneself while breathing in, experiencing this embodied well-being, this sense of bodily calm. Wherever you feel it initially, however you can sense it, just realizing that there is, and it isn't that the body is somehow feeling great, it's really a reflection of the mind that knows, having this stability of non-judging, intimate, relaxed, vivid awareness. And the body's reflects that beautiful way the mind is relating, holding, being with the body, as a felt sense of bodily well-being or calmness, bodily calmness. And the Buddha really advises that we let the pleasure of that well-being, let it have its effect. Which all that means is we have to be interested in the well-being, the embodied well-being. And interestingly, it's not easy. We want to do something with a nice feeling of well-being. But just to, in a sense, bathe in it, relax with it, allow it to have its effect, the suffusion, like let it go, spread, so it's everywhere, nothing is left untouched by that sense of calmness in the body, that well-being in the body. So that, that just to repeat, just the willing to bring your whole heart to each of these parts of the first tetrad, the first set of 4 instructions. We'll spend, at least the first 3 weeks on these. And hopefully, we're going to spend the next number of decades or lifetimes with these teachings, because the great thing about the path, and this is just one of the most specific ways the Buddha outlines the whole path of awakening. It's all here in these 16 steps. You don't need anything else. And all the maps the Buddha used, they just overlap each other. They're just covering the same territory. But he was speaking to different people with different, personalities or tendencies. And so how he taught arose to be appropriate in that moment for those people in that situation. But this is by far, the most specific meditation instructions the Buddha gave, these 16 steps. So it's really worthwhile not rushing, but like giving ourselves the time to really get your own sense, your own independent sense of what the Buddha might be talking about with this instruction. Oh, and remember, each instruction is revealing a pleasure that's not dependent so much on outward conditions, because it's really about the mind retreating in the direction of non-attachment, non-dependence. Like just that first step that I spent a lot of time with tonight, where we're using the exclusive object of the breath, the non-dependence on all the other experiences that are coming and going in our field of sensitivity, that we don't have to be responsible to all the other ways that the sensitive heart is being touched by sound, by sight, by thought. All of that can be in the background. And that is a beginning of learning the possibility of non-attachment, non-clinging. Of course, there's much more to say. Next week, we'll have small groups. David Braun, for a couple of years, would help organize the small groups on Zoom. If any of you on Zoom feel somewhat fluent with Zoom and want to help out creating those breakout groups, you can just send me an email and I'll tell you how to do that. We also need some program hosts to help set up and close down the building. And I have a sign up here, and you could just sign up to do 1 or 2 weeks during the next 7 weeks. That would be great. And there are people like myself and others who will train you if you haven't done it before. It's pretty straightforward, but let me know if you want to help with that. And of course, a lot's coming up, but I don't have time to share that. But all the programs are listed on our calendar. And those of you who feel part of the community, you might want to get on the weekly email list if you're not already on that, and you'll hear about what's coming up in the programs. And you can just send the center an email, or there is a place on the website where you could just sign up directly to get that weekly email from the office. So nice to be together. Thanks for coming, everyone. Hope to see you next Monday night.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.